in the midst of the congestion and development so familiar to the northeastern U.S., there lies an oasis. One can sense a change traveling down New Jersey's western coast along the lower Delaware, where it enters the bay, into Salem, Cumberland, and western Cape May counties. Connected to the area is a culture that might seem very familiar because it is part of our history, but compared to the world around us, this culture seems out of another time. It is a world of small communities and open spaces, where the remnants of generations who've come before stand preserved, where people depend on work closely tied to the land and the water, and carry on the legacy of their forebears. The schooner A.J. Meerwald has been restored to sail by a local group dedicated to raising people's awareness about this bayshore area. The Meerwald reflects the connection to the natural resources, to a maritime tradition, and to a folk culture that cherishes its heritage. The schooner also represents a time when the plentiful oyster harvest helped other local industries thrive, like boat building.
There has been a shipyard here in Dorchester for over 150 years. My father worked at the old Leesburg shipyard about 3 miles south of here as a ship carpenter in the wintertime, and then went up the bay and caught oysters in the spring. And so when the oyster business went bad in the 50s and there wasn't any oysters to catch in the bay, they called him up here and asked him if he wanted to come to work up here. It's kind of in my blood, the shipyard industry and the oyster industry. It goes back generations in my family. The people that were employed here are probably within a 20-mile radius of here, 99% of them. There are people that their father worked here. There are people that their uncle worked here. The yard has always been basically a wood yard. We have not built any new boats in recent history. So we're going to try to get into some old wooden yacht restorations and try to keep this good group of people that we have here doing what they do traditionally.
The small towns along the bayshore are filled with people who take on the work of those who came before them. What keeps tradition strong here is a reliance on the natural elements, the land and its relationship to the water. It was the land and the water that brought Native Americans to these rivers near the bay in the first place. European colonists sought the same bounty in the 17th century. The rivers would serve as excellent transportation routes, and the landscape would provide a perfect home for permanent communities.
You'll see here is that the way in which they're laid out in this diaper work, and the question is, where does this come from?
Right.
And folks have kicked it around a lot, and some folks have argued for continental origins and other for regional British tradition. What you see as you look at this area is all the evidence for the full array of national and ethnic building traditions that inform the landscapes that we see today. Within the compass of a few short miles, as you will see the earliest surviving durable architecture in the region. One of the most distinctive elements in the landscapes of South Jersey are the brick houses with patterned ends, largely associated with the early Quaker settlements. These patterned ends are made out of glazed brick, which are laid up in geometric devices such as diamonds or inverted triangles, and they typically bear either dates or initials or both. What they really represent is sort of this sense of permanence and durability. There are no landscapes which possess a greater richness of early buildings, ranging from the very first settlements on through the 19th century, For example, you will find down in the area around present-day Greenwich surviving frame buildings, which reflect the earliest New England building traditions as both Baptists and Quakers relocate into this area. And then there are the more complex patterns associated with the tidewater reaches of the mid-Atlantic. And just as folks in the very early colonial periods were quick to make their stamp on the landscape with the large pattern-ended houses, they did so again in the mid-1800s with these fashionable new country estates. When we talk about the relationship between people and nature, one of the greatest examples of how this works was the floating cabin. They would be anchored in small encampments known as scow dives, and folks who worked on the fishery would then row out in their shad skiffs to fish the Delaware River for 24 hours a day. The mix of architectural traditions really speaks to the diversity of the populations of South Jersey. Each has left their mark in the landscape, a landscape which is defined from its earliest European settlements by tolerance and toleration. There are a few other landscapes where you will find quite the mix of religious institutions at such an early date.
Free black settlements, where they were self-contained, they usually had their own schools, their own stores, and because basically laws of the land, they could not commingle anyway, so they were self-contained. Some of the earliest that can be recalled is Springtown, the Ghoultown area, and Othello. Historically, African Americans migrated here from the South, and most of them came in during farming time, and they worked agriculturally in the fields during different seasons. And then they also came into this area and started working in the fishing industry, shucking oysters. They were the laborers. They did most of the hard work. So they stayed, and they started building homes here and raising their families. Reverend Donaldson, who was my great-great-uncle, was a pastor of this church. That's where he worked in the fishing industry down in this area. We're the kind of community people will come to. It's a good place to settle down with your family and to be.
Oh, how sweet.
There are natural wonders here, too. This small portion of bayshore serves as a crossroads for migratory birds, as well as a world-renowned birthplace for the ancient horseshoe crab.
The Delaware Bay shore is world famous for its concentration of shorebirds that have flown here nonstop from southern South America, arrive here on the beaches because there's just a glut of food for them. Visitors are totally in awe of what they see so easily here. Masses upon masses of shorebirds covering the beach, feeding on horseshoe crab eggs. This is the second largest concentration of shorebirds in the New World.
The protection of Delaware Bay in terms of both actual wildlife and the land and the habitat that the wildlife require works best when it's all the agencies working together. Involved here is the state of New Jersey, the Endangered Species Program, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Nature Conservancy, New Jersey Audubon, and also regulatory agencies from the state of Delaware. So here we have both states that are involved in Delaware Bay working together for the common good of these species.
No less important to the ecosystem are the area's highly productive salt marshes that play a key role in the life of the entire bay.
The marsh, because it warms up quickly in the spring, because it has lots of shallow waters where small fish are protected from their major predators, which are big fish, makes a perfect nursery area for little fish. They grow rapidly so that when they go back out in the fall, they're bigger and they're better able to survive, and they're more quickly available to get into the fishery.
John Teal is an authority on salt marshes who has begun working on an ambitious project to return diked marshes to their original wild state.
The Jersey wetlands, particularly along the Delaware Bay, were diked very early in the period of European settlement. Some of them were diked for salt hay, some of them were diked for growing vegetables, some of them were diked just to encourage waterfowl production for hunting and trapping. The Estuarine Enhancement Program is the biggest salt marsh restoration project that's ever been undertaken anywhere, making them functional salt marshes again, restoring their value for fish production, bird habitat, etc.
Some natural resources have not survived the toll of human influence. The community of Bayside was once called Caviar, when the bountiful sturgeon harvest here supplied the world's caviar market.
Really, it was called the caviar capital of the world. There was a restaurant there, the telegraph office, post office, and of course a lot of fishing shanties to take care of the transit fishermen. I feel a little bit sad because I remember what it used to be like and what it is now. And when you see something like that disappear in your lifetime, it gives you a feeling of sadness.
Having witnessed the consequences of overfishing and pollution, people have taken action to protect the valuable resources still left. More than 25 years of environmental awareness and clean water initiatives have helped improve the quality of life in the bay. And fish populations, including the sturgeon, have slowly begun returning. The economies of the area rise and fall with the health of the natural resources. Changes in the resources require adaptations to tradition. A town like Port Norris is a perfect example. Plentiful oysters made Port Norris a boom town, but when the harvest deteriorated, the industry practically disappeared. 100 years after the boom, the harvest pales in comparison to its former glory. Over time, many oystermen adapted by going into commercial crabbing, while other local entrepreneurs began guiding recreational crabbers. Many traditional harvests, like railbird hunting, are now either folk hobbies or tourist industries, where the experts of old are the new guides.
Fortescue is known as the weakfish capital of the world. I was born and raised in Newport, the next town. My father was a fisherman, and we fished this bay many years ago when we had to row out. And that's how I got my initiation to the Delaware Bay fishing. I was a commercial fisherman for a while, but my business has taken recreational fishermen, and I enjoy it. I hope they do too. We have right around 150,000 visitors a year here in Fortescue. There's nothing here but fishing. It's not a beach town, it's not a casino town, it's a fishing town.
Boat building is another tradition which has shown its resilience by adapting to changing times.
Did you check the RPM ratings when you guys ran the boat earlier?
Boat building was a part of this piece of property over 50 years ago, and we're continuing that tradition.
Electrical panel, has that all been checked out?
We expanded our operations in Millville to the current facilities we have here now, which are 320,000 square feet of manufacturing. We are a Jersey builder, but we ship everywhere. There are people here whose grandfathers and great-grandfathers were involved with the oyster boats many years ago on the Maurice River. They have an affinity for boats. They're all fishermen, or they like to be around boats, and that's what's drawn them to our business.
I've been carving duck decoys for about 35 years. I used to make them to hunt with, and then it's changed a lot since then. Now you sell a single decoy to people and they want it signed and it become an art form. There are different traditions of carving, especially in New Jersey. There's the Delaware River style carving and there's the Barnegat Bay style carving. But there's contemporary carving style. We've made the birds bigger, made the birds so they float better, and it makes a lot of difference if you're going to hunt with them.
This area gives me subject matter, firstly. Secondly, it gives me subject matter that I truly love. If you can watch enough and become familiar with the little movements and attitudes that the birds display, and then transpose that into your carving, you have more than just a little carving of a bird. You have a bird doing its thing in its environment, and that's what I try and do.
I came back to South Jersey because of the birds. And in my later years, there's more variety of birds here than in most other places in the country. It's just a great place to be.
Communities are just beginning to explore eco and heritage tourism as 21st century opportunities, but even these will still depend on the well-being of the resources. Traditional work continues to evolve. At one time, many farmers diked the meadows along the Morris River. The Burcham sisters worked the last such farm in operation.
The elevation is high to keep the river out, and that locks the land in to keep it dry. At the same time, to take care of the runoff water from rain and so forth, there has to be some kind of a sluice gate in the dike, so that when the tide goes down, if the water in the holding ditch is high, it will push the water out into the river. When the tide comes up, that sluice gate closes to keep the river water from coming in on the land. The dikes formerly were maintained by using the mud from the river. That kept the river clean, and it also served as material for the dikes. In fact, the whole Morris River had been diked for the rich farmland that lies behind it. Well, I think that we have a very interesting gem, if you want to call it that. We would like to see it perpetuated, but I don't know whether that will be a reality or not.
Since the earliest European settlement, farmers have diked meadows to grow salt hay, a harvest that has practically disappeared. The business of agriculture has changed the crop choices and the farming methods over the last 300 years. New crops like sod fill the niche, grown on the land once used for other commercial crops. But the strength of the area still lies in traditional products, vegetables and fruit.
This farm has been in the family since the late 1890s. My great-grandfather purchased this farm. He was the first one to grow vegetables here in this area. Since then, we've graduated from being a 12-horse farm to about 1,000 acres of vegetables, mechanized farm. We sort of have a microclimate here in that the bay is a buffer to us. A bay breeze off of the water would tend to keep us warmer in the fall and keep us cooler in the afternoon in the summertime also.
This whole South Jersey area has been well known for agriculture, both in vegetables and fruit, and specifically this land, this 500 acres that we're growing fruit on, is now second generation in our family, but it was a fruit farm for 3 generations before we came here. The influence of the ocean and the bay makes this unique almost worldwide as far as being perfect conditions for peach growing. The moderating influence of those 2 huge bodies of water really serve as a buffer and a kind of a mother protector for the fruit.
Local consumers flock to roadside stands where a small portion of the area's agricultural crop is sold. Most of the product is headed out of the area to supply supermarkets, a process known as truck farming.
It's just an isolated little area that's kind of bypassed by the Delaware Memorial Bridge, and that makes it, I think, unique in preserving a little nook where agriculture can still do its thing, because if the rest of the world comes here, agriculture will simply have to leave. So we kind of feel very lucky that we are overlooked by everybody. It makes it perfect for agriculture.
The natural resources of the area help build another industry that remains strong today: glass. The industry was born in Salem County. Caspar Wister, a German immigrant and Quaker, founded the first successful glass factory in America in 1739. Two resources in particular drew the glassmakers: timber for heating the raw material and a great abundance of sand.
Melanie and I came in 1986 to the area. We live about 15 minutes from Millville in the little town of Cedarville, and we started a glass studio there. It's so close to New York, Philadelphia, DC, but there's a little pocket where, you know, the neighbors have lived there long, long time, and they haven't ventured far out of it, and a lot of industry hasn't come into the area. So it was really kind of a nice, quiet setting, but still gave us access to cities and things where we needed to go sell the work. Glass blowing we do is very traditional in technique, and the tools and the methods used probably haven't changed in the last thousands of years. The product has changed a lot and the aesthetic has changed, but technically what we do and how we do it is very similar to the first days of blowing glass. There's a really large tradition in southern New Jersey of paperweight tradition, making handmade paperweights, which originally were kind of an end-of-the-day piece where the factory workers made for themselves, for gifts for their family and that sort of thing. And the work that I'm doing now is actually based on a paperweight, although it's made into a more of a plate or bowl forms, but the center and core of it is actually a traditional paperweight. Culturally, it's still important in the area. We have continued, I think, a way of working that began here, and the resources that we've tapped into and have become part of our work are from a long string of tradition locally.
So many times people will ask me, you know, you were born and raised here in South Jersey, Pat, and how can you keep on going to the same area as a painter or a photographer? It is so beautiful. There's a magic spirit to South Jersey, or the wetlands around Cumberland County and the Delaware Bay area. You can just stand in one of these fields or sit along the marsh, and you just know that it's just teeming with all kinds of life. Look at the textures, the beauty of it all, the clouds, the stillness of the water, sometimes the roughness of the water. It just serves, to me, constantly as inspiration.
For so many reasons, both cultural and environmental, this area along the bay needs to be preserved as part of our national heritage. The National Park Service is conducting extensive surveys of the region's potential national significance and continues to support groups, both public and private, who work to conserve the bayshore.
Any conservation program depends on there being lots of people involved. You've got to have people who are promoting the conservation, so the conservation organizations, local groups who want to see something stay unspoiled. Then you have to have government that is willing to back this up and support it. You have to have people who can provide the wherewithal to do it. And a very important aspect of all these conservation efforts is that you have to keep doing it. Development, destruction only has to happen once. Conservation has to happen again and again and again and again.
The effort to preserve this area's distinctive character will certainly be a struggle because the region lies so close to the ever-encroaching world of suburbs and strip malls.
I think all of the small towns in southern New Jersey really retain something that has almost disappeared across the United States, that sense of community and sense of people willing to help each other. It's almost as if the rest of the world is passing us by.
It's a landscape that is defined neither by human dominion or natural phenomena that can't be overcome. Folks have both shaped the landscape and been shaped by it over the more than 3 centuries that they have lived here.
People in the overdeveloped area in North Jersey doesn't realize what a value we have down here in this area. You just take it for granted that it all looks like North Jersey, and I believe that a lot of people are shocked to see how interesting some of the open spaces are here and how pretty it is.
If we do not teach and educate our young people today for the now and for the future, then all what is here is lost. I am very optimistic because I know there's an awareness rising, I do believe. No matter how minute it is, we can't let it go.
How long have we been taking care of? The first people who sailed into the bay here, they talk about historical accounts.
An appreciation of the past can help shape the changes brought on by the modern world. If this oasis is to remain, it must preserve the tie to the region's natural and cultural resources.
Down Jersey most often was referred to as a rural area, you know. And if you're down Jersey, why you either a fisherman or a farmer.
Down Jersey means the bay side of the lower part of the Jersey. It's a unique place to be.
Down Jersey is a little bit having sand in your shoes, a little bit being a piney. It's almost like being a Southerner. If you listen to down Jersey people talk, they almost have Southern accents or a strange twang. But they're a very natural people who are really connected to the land and the sea.
Down Jersey is the people who still live here, who still do the same things that their fathers did, their grandfathers did, and the whole family's done. They have a way of life that's just very, very comfortable, and it's just a wonderful place to be. This is as down Jersey as you can get.